Okay. Okay, we started recording now. So we've been doing the Sefer Yetzira. We've had a break of a month or something now. So we'll do a bit of Chazara this week, and then kind of move into a more practical section or few weeks about what is the meditation practical side of the Sefer Yetzira. So let's just read through the Sefer Yetzira, different Mishnah, and we'll do it together. And I've got it on screen for whoever's on screen. Okay, so what I've done is I've set what we did up until now. We've looked at the first 8 Mishnayot, which the way I see it is the first section of the Sefer Yetzira. So we said in the past that the Sefer Yetzira is separated into 6 chapters. It discusses the 32 paths of wisdom, which are the 10 Sefirot and the 22 letters, what is referred to as Duality of Differentiation. And the whole of the Sefer Yetzira discusses these different elements. The first chapter discusses the 10 Sefirot. The second, third, fourth, fifth chapters discuss the Duality of Differentiation, the letters of foundation, and the 6th chapter is another general chapter. But when you look at the Sefer Yetzira, it seems to be the first chapter seems to be separated into 2 sections, and especially when you look at the Gra version. The Gra version. So there are other versions. Most versions are similar to the Gra. There is one version, I can't remember, well, actually there are loads of versions. One version which I've seen, which is very different. I think it's the Sadia version, which mixes up chapters, puts things which are in the Gra version in this chapter, in the first chapter, into different chapters. So you know, I can't speak for all the different versions, but for the Gra version, the first chapter of the Sefer Yetzira seems to be separated into 2 distinct kind of elements, sections. And the first section ends with Mishnah 8, and from Mishnah 8 onwards, from Mishnah 9, you'll see what it does is it starts to delineate, or starts to talk individually about individual Sefirot. So Mishnah 9, sorry, it says Eser Sefirot Blima, 10 Sefirot of Blima, Echat Ruach Elokim Chaim. The first one is Ruach Elokim Chaim, and it's the same pattern for the next Mishnayot. Mishnah 10 Sefirot of nothingness. Well, actually, it doesn't start with 10 Sefirot of nothingness. Actually, it just starts. Mishnah 10, 2 is Ruach Miruach, wind, breath from breath. So it starts to list them and starts to describe them individually. And so that's why it's kind of a separate kind of thing. So the first 8 Mishnah will discuss it in a general sense. And the next, the rest of it, I don't know how it goes on to. It's been a while, it's been over a month since I've actually even opened Sefer Yetzira. Until this afternoon, just before you arrived. So I have to refresh my memory a little bit. So that's how that's why I think it's separate. That's what I've done here. I'll send it out to you. But for people who are watching on Zoom or watching a recording, you'll see that I've created a spreadsheet image PowerPoint presentation where all the first 8 Mishnahs are on the page, and so we can see them and analyze them as a whole, as a unit. One thing I have to first of all say thank you to Yetzira, because last time, earlier on, you noticed a citation, a reference to the Reb Tzadok Sefer Zichronot. If you remember, we were discussing a few weeks ago one of the first sessions about the mystery schools of Judaism, and we saw the Perek En Darshin, which is the 2nd chapter of Masechta Chagiga. En Darshin and En Darshin Ba'arayot. So there are three things which we are limited in what we are allowed to study. And the first one is Arayot, Sitri Arayot, the mysteries of union. Then there was Maaseh Bereshit, which is the mysteries of creation, and Maaseh Merkava, the mysteries of the chariot, of Yechezkel's vision. And so there we saw, when we were discussing Maaseh Merkava, we saw that there was Rav Yosef, who was a mumche, who was an expert in Maaseh Merkava, and he was teaching the Sabbath Pumbedita, the elders of Pumbedita, which was the what's it called, the yeshiva in Bavel, that they were experts in Maaseh Bereshit, and he was an expert in Maaseh Merkava. And the question was, he asked them to teach him Maaseh Bereshit, and they asked him to teach him Maaseh Merkava. And the question was how did he knew Maaseh Merkava not know Maaseh Bereshit? Yeah. Or did he know and he was just testing them? And what is Maaseh Bereshit a preliminary study that you need to know in order to go into in order to study Maaseh Merkava? And therefore he was testing them by asking them to teach him about it first, or whether you can know Maaseh Bereshit without knowing Maaseh Merkava. And you found a citation to Reb Tzadok's Sefer, which I found, and it's an amazing reference, and I ended up learning the whole thing over. It's not very long; it's quite short, but I ended up learning the whole thing, and that was my kind of project for the Chagim. And I ended up finishing, I think, on second day on Yom Kippur. I think I finished it. So I can't remember when I finished it. I finished it over Yom Noraim. Amazing thing. It really kind of gave me. That would kind of like nourished me throughout the beginning of the year, and he there says he follows the view that Rav Yosef didn't know Maaseh Bereshit, and he gives an explanation to it. But in order to understand it, it talks about he identifies what is Maaseh Bereshit and what is Maaseh Merkava. So he says there that they are all part of the mitzvah of Yichud Hashem. So it might be really useful at some point to kind of go there. We'll dive back into it later, because we'll see some ideas which are connected to it. But he says there that Maaseh Merkava is this highest level of knowing, the higher unity, or what the Zohar refers to as Yichud Ila'a, the high upper unity, high unity, and whereas Maaseh Bereshit refers to Yichud Tata, the lower unity. So like I mentioned, I brought that thing that I wrote, and I said that Maaseh Merkava is a state of mind where you no longer perceive yourself as an independent entity. So that's exactly how Reb Tzadok explains it there. And the idea of prophecy is that you move beyond yourself as an individual. Whereas Maaseh Bereshit, in Hasidic terms, that's referred to as bitul b'mitziut, complete absorption within the divine. Another word, or annihilation, the word is used, but I think bitul is like an idea of absorption, just like in the sense of B'ata b'shishim or something. When a piece of non-kosher thing is immersed with something which is non-kosher is immersed in something which is, then there is this idea of nullification. Something becomes absorbed within the other one to the extent that it no longer has any identity.
This is Maaseh Bereshit.
So this is Maaseh Merkava, is what is referred to as the bitul b'mitzius. Complete, absolute annihilation of self, nullification of self. Whereas Maaseh Bereshit, so that's the reason why Maaseh Merkava can't be taught to anybody, because there is nobody to teach, right? Has to understand it for myself. Basically, you have to go through a process of self-transcendence in order to kind of have a grasp of it, understanding of it, and so therefore you can't teach it. Literally, you can't teach it. Not that you're not allowed, but you literally cannot teach it, because it is not something. It implies, within it is a reality where there is no other. There is no concept of otherness. Whereas Maaseh Bereshit, you can teach to one person, because it's still within the realm of duality. It's still in the realm of there is a human being and a world around, or God and the universe, are different ways of looking at it. And So that is the idea of this lower unity, Yehuda Tata.
This is Yehuda Tata. Maaseh Merkava is Yehuda
Yehuda Ila'a.
Ila.
Yeah. And Maaseh Bereshit is Yehuda Tata, which is Bittul Hayesh. So within Bittul Hayesh, so one of the things, Bittul Hayesh is absorption state, but there is still an aspect of self within that. So therefore, there is a possibility for service and mitzvahs and everything that's involved in the world of duality. So in that book also, Reb Tzadok mentions Sefer Yetzira, and he says the Sefer Yetzira is a book of Maaseh Bereshit. It's a book which teaches about this lower unity, therefore, according to his own definition of what is Maaseh Bereshit. And that kind of makes me question, what is it, and what do we do with this first section, therefore, of 1 to 8? Because in my opinion, this first section corresponds to Maaseh Merkava, because it deals with the upper unity and nullification of self.
Yetzira is Maaseh Merkava.
So Maaseh Bereshit, he says. That's what he says. Yeah. So I think. So I think he's right. I think in the general sense, the Sefer Yetzira discusses the process of creation, and when you read it, what you're doing is you're understanding how from out of nothing comes forth form, right? And this is kind of the central idea within Chazal, and the rabbis, and then within Torah, of the creation of the universe, which is Briat Yesh Mi'ayin. So the Greeks, or some schools within Greek philosophy, and other other schools as well around the world, believed in the eternity of the universe, that the universe had no beginning, that it was co-existent, or is it co-evil? I think it's co-evil with God, who forms, or a sentient and absolute being, who forms the universe from a pre-existing co-eternal substance. Right, and so this is Rambam spent his time arguing with this and saying that, how he actually, I believe, if I kind of remember, I think he says that it's not provable in terms of the universe. It's also not disprovable, unprovable, if I remember correctly in the moment of him. But that we should, and therefore we should believe in what Chazal said, because we have something on those lines. Go on, Roland.
Well, there's all sorts of academic debate, because the explicit point is don't know either way. But then there are lots of rabbis who say, well, if you read him, they think he's trying to say that they are co-eternal, but he doesn't really want to say it. So he then says, we don't know.
Okay.
Okay. There are some who interpret him that way, even among, let's say, academics. But I'll also just mention the point of general interest. That there were a number of great rabbis, medieval period, who did say the universe was eternal, but of course that did not mean that it wasn't created.
Okay.
It was created, but that doesn't mean it wasn't co-evil.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. That's you're talking about now time, so that kind of complicates things a little bit.
Yeah,
you could argue that same thing with the Big Bang, because the Big Bang is an argument about whether time existed before the Big Bang, so therefore you could say it's the universe is eternal.
That's right. So you can only talk about time meaningfully once the universe is created anyway. So a lot of it rests on that. But I think among those who said it was co-evil was Chasdai Crescus. So yeah, big
interesting. Name. Okay, very good. Thank you for that, Roland. That's always helpful to get you with your encyclopedic broad knowledge of it. So okay, fine. In any case, the idea of Briat Yesh Mi'ayin, the idea of creation out of something out of nothing, whether we talk about time or not, was a fundamental idea within rabbinic Judaism. And so therefore you can't really talk about creation without talking about the yesh mi ayin. So therefore, there has to be some kind of ayin somewhere, and that's why I think this first section is referencing, it's talking about it, about the ayin in some kind of way. And then from Mishnah 9 onwards, we start to see even within the Sefirot division. So up until now, what we've seen, what we'll go and say again, that the Sefirot in the first 8 sections, so first section of the Sefer Yetzira, there is they are indivisible. They have a simultaneous kind of independent existence and non-independent existence. And we'll see how they can be named or described or counted. At the same time, they also can't be counted. They also can't be separated. So if you can't separate something, how can you count it? Anyway, we can count something, and the whole idea of a sphera is it's a counting, right? So the same idea, if you can't count, if something is indivisible, you can't count. Then you can't count any parts to it. It doesn't have any parts, so you can't separate them into parts. Okay. Mm-hmm. Questions, comments?
So Mishnah from the 9th Mishnah onwards begins the separation of. Yeah.
So that's how I say, yeah, because from Mishnah 9, you'll suddenly see echad, the Sefirot themselves are being counted.
And until then, it's just pure.
Until then, so until then, it talks about SS Sefirot. It doesn't say individual.
Separates, right?
Yeah.
It
just says that there are 10, and then it says we'll see how it works. We'll see how there is. It's almost I have this vision. You can visualize it as a kind of like expanding and contracting bubble, where it's like there's form. It kind of expands into form, and then it comes back into nothingness. Like that's the image I kind of have of it when I see it, because it talks about separation and talks about it's not separate. Okay, that was just an introduction. What time is it? What time did we start? Okay, so if you get your Sefer Yetzira out, so we'll read the first 8. We've already seen them, so hopefully it's just Chazara, and then we can start to see how they come out practically and how we can come to an experience of them. Okay, so have you got them? I'll read. ב-32 נתיבות פלאות חוכמה חקק כהשם צבקות אלוקי ישראל אלוקים חיים מלך עולם כל שדי רחום וחנון רם ונישא שוכן עד בקדוש שמו ומרום בקדוש הוא וברא את עולמו ב3 ספרים בספר בסיפור. Okay, so translate that with 32 wondrous paths of wisdom engraved. Ka, Hashem, Tzedakot, Elokei Yisrael, etc. There are, what would we say, 22 names there correspond, or 22 words there corresponding to 22 letters of the creation, which is how a Gra's comment on that. And he created his universe with 3 books, with Sefer, with Spar, with Sipur, and we saw how this connects to this idea of sapphire, of the idea that they connect to the Sefirot. So there are different ways of saying Sefirah. So the 32 parts connect to the Sefirot. Like that. We spoke about speaking, dialogue, the text itself, and the story. But also another way of looking at it, also, I said Rabbi Ginsburg talks about Seferis. It's supposed to sparse accounting. Anyway, this is how we come to understand knowledge, how we come to understand the world through the different faculties. That was just the introduction. So that's what you can almost say that this first Mishnah and the second Mishnah are even an introduction to the first 8, because they just give you a general idea. So the second Mishnah says, Eses Sefirot Blima, ב-22 אותיות יסוד, 3 אימות, ו7 כפולות ו12 פשוטות. So now we define what these 32 paths are. There are 10 Sefirot. Go up to the top for the people on the video. 10 Sefirot of nothingness, or we said ineffable Sefirot. So the word Blima, which we'll see in the next Mishnah, has these 2 meanings. Is it the next Mishnah? No. The Mishnah, the 8th one, the last one. You can see, if you go online, you can see what's there. And then 22 letters of foundation. And these 22 letters of foundation themselves divided into 3 sections: the imahot, 3 mothers, 7 doubles, and 12 elemental.
These are the divisions of the 22 letters.
Yes.
He's grouping them in.
Yeah. So you can take 22. 22 is 12 plus 7 plus 3.
Yeah, 12 century. Okay, so and so what are the mothers that you read?
So we'll go through that later. Yeah. We'll go through that later on what they are, and then when we go to the second section of the segment.
Here's just outlining.
So here he's just outlining
22 divided into 12, 7, and 3.
If you want to have a side tangential point, you see these numbers 22, 7, 3, and 10. They each one of these, like two of these letters, a few, like in 3 cases, their ratio is an approximation of pi.
Okay.
Which is quite interesting. The Gra comments on that idea. And 20, I think it's 27 over 2. 7 over, is it 27 over 2? What is pi? I think 1.4. 27 over 2 was an approximation of pi, which was used up until relatively recently.
Oh wow! Okay.
Historically, around the world. Okay, so those first 2 Mishnah, I'll just give you a general idea of what the Sefer is talking about. 32 parts of wisdom, creating the universe, 3 books, Sefer, text and number, communication, and then the next Mishnah comes on and says, yes, this Sefer Sefirot, the countings and letters we use to communicate. Okay, that's a general idea. And now from 3 to 8, we see a coming into an understanding of where language comes from, and how and where thought comes from as well, where being comes from. So we've seen one of the things that Kabbalists early on were discussing was the idea of yesh and ayin, which I mentioned before. We're at yesh and ayin. So yesh, being, comes forth from ayin, from nothingness. And this is the idea of how being comes forth from nothingness. Is kind of, and again, the Sefirot are, the creative process is a kind of mirroring thing. It's almost like the beginning contains all, and it's just about unpacking the different things. And so therefore, it's like it's fractal, idea of a fractal. Every expansion is a kind of a reflection of what was there originally. So it's just repeating in some ways what was there previously, but expanding upon it. Okay. So let's now kind of take a deep dive into the next 6. So number 3. Esser Sefirot blima, מספר 10 אצבעות, 5 כנגד 5, וברית יחיד מכוון באמצע במילת הלשון ובמילת המאור. There are 10 Sefirot of nothingness of blima. I'm not going to translate it because, again, like I said, blima means without, like it can be comprised of 2 words, bli and ma, without what, or blima, we'll see number 8, where it means silence or stopping, withholding. So I'm going to say blima without translating it. This is for blima. Ben mispar it's in the number of the 10 fingers, 5 opposite 5, and a singular covenant directly or directing in between in the brit, in the circumcision of the tongue and in the circumcision of the body of the flesh. And what you'll see here is that the word blima, sorry, let's say
Yeah.
blima, right?
Word. It's made into one word.
Yeah, it's made into one word, yeah. We see the word blima, we saw the idea of, what does it say? Milat, bemilat, and blimat. Let's just finish off and we'll come back again. I'm gonna read all of it and we'll go back. Okay, number 4. SS Sfirot Bli. So this is you're remembering, right? Hopefully you remember. SS Sfirot Blima, SS V'lo Tesha, SS V'lo 11. Haven b'chokhma v'chachkem b'vina b'chon bahen v'chakom mehem v'ha'amed davar al morio v'ashev yoter al mechon. 10 Sfirot of nothingness. 10 Sfirot Blima, sorry. That's what I was going to say. 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Understand with wisdom, be wise with understanding, examine with them, and probe from them. Establish every word by its nature, this is my translation, and return the creator to his base. Okay, next one. Ese Sfirot Blima, Midatan Ese She'en Lehem Sof, Omek Reshit Ve'omek Acharit, Omek Tov Ve'omek Ra, Omek Rom Ve'omek Tachat, Omek Mizrach Ve'omek Ma'arav, Omek Tzafon Ve'omek Darom, Adon Yechid El Melech Ne'eman, Moshel B'kulam, Zimaon Kodsho Ad Ad Ad. Right, long one. Well, it just seems long, maybe. 10 Sfirot Blima. Their measure is 10, which has no end. A depth of beginning, a depth of end, a depth of good, a depth of evil, a depth of above, a depth of below, a depth of east, a depth of west, a depth of north, a depth of south. A singular master, God, faithful king, from his holy dwelling until the eternity of eternities, rules over them all. So here we see that the Sfirot are divided.
10.
Sorry?
10 depths. It's interesting
10
because
depths, yeah.
during the Yom Narayim, I saw in the Kavanot, so some of the things that we're doing is related to these 10 depths. Like during the period of Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, the 10 days of Shuvah is related to these 10 depths. Yeah.
Where did you see that?
In the Siddur of like the Rashash and Ben Ish Chai brings out.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
You've got 10 days, then you've got 10
Where we
Sfirot.
say between the end of between Yishtabach, that bracha was at the end of Yishtabach of Psukkah Zimra and the bracha of Shema. There's that Shema Hamadot Amakim. It's to do with the emek, to do with the depth.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, look. Also, if you know the fourth Mishnah, it talks about it's separate. It talks about wisdom and understanding. Obviously, as you know, wisdom and understanding are two of the Sfirot. So again, it identifies them. Okay, number 6. Ese Sfirot Blima. צפיעתן כמראה הבזעק בתכליתן אין להם קץ, ודברו בהן ברצו ושוב, ולמאמרו כסופה ירדופו, ולפני כסאו הם משתחווים. 10 Sfirot Blima, their vision is like the appearance of lightning. Their limit has no end. His word in them is in the manner of running and returning. They rush to his saying like a whirlwind, and before his throne they prostrate themselves. Okay. Now, I put in the Hebrew here, you won't see, but I put a question mark on whether or not number 6 and number 7 should be switched around. And the reason why, so the Gra's explanation for why they're not switched around is because number 5 talks about midatan en lahem ketz, en lahem sof. Their measure has no end, and again, en lahem sof is basically en sof, right? It is en sof. Their measure is en sof. And number 6, in the way we have it, it says tachlitan en lahem ketz. So there's a mirroring there where it says their purpose or their function or their expression has no end, has no limit, right? So there's a mirroring there, and so I'm going back to I didn't read it recently, but I read it ages ago, and I believe what the Gra says there is that one is looking up and one is looking down. One is looking back to the source, the midatan, and himself, the measure has no end, and the other one is looking down into their functionality, their expression in the universe or as the universe. So let's go into number 7. I'll explain to you why I think they should be inversed. Again, don't forget that the Gra himself, or was it the Gra? I don't know why. The Ari had it as well. Anyway, in any case, it was the other versions put them in different orders. So again, there must have been a reason why he put it in this order. But again, it could have been the other way. So number 7, Eses Sfirot Blima. Did I translate it, by the way, or did I not translate it?
No, you did no.
I did translate it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I think so. Eses Sfirot Blima, number 7. Eses Sfirot Blima, Na'otz, or Ne'otz, or Na. Yeah, you can look at it different ways. So Ari Kaplan says that you can read the Sefer doesn't have, like the Torah doesn't have any like the Sefer doesn't have any vowels, so you can read it different ways, and you can read it as a past, this happened, or you can read it in a do this in an imperative. So Eses Sfirot Blima Na'ot or Na'ot or Ne'ot is you can either do this thing, or this thing this is how it is. So Na'ot Sofan B'Tchilatan B'Sofan Keshalhevet Kshura B'Gachelet She'adon Yachid Ve'en Lo Sheni V'Lefne Ma Echad Ma'ata Sofer. 10 Sfirot Blima, their end is embedded in their beginning. Embedded, so the idea of Ne'ot. So it's either embed their end in their beginning, or their end is embedded. You can look at it both ways. Like a flame in a burning coal. In a burning coal, for the master is singular. He has no second and before one. What do you count? So again, I read this question back ages ago. Why did I write it? Yeah, because it seems to me that Mishnah is more appropriately applied to the number 5, because their end embedded in their beginning. Is it referring to all of them as a whole, i.e. number 1 is embedded in number 10, number 10 number 1, or each one of them? We saw these different depths. There are 10 depths, and do we say that the depth of what was the first one? The depth of good is embedded in the depth of evil. That the end of these things are embedded within those things. So therefore, each one of these 10 directions or 10 depths actually correspond to each other. So good and evil, beginning and end, north and south, forward and backwards, right and left.
Na'ot is embed, is that right?
So Na'ot is embed, yeah, or embedded. So you could read it in a kind of imperative of these ends are embedded in that. That's why I thought that's one reason why I feel like it's connected to that one. Another reason was that the idea of number 6, which is talking about Sfiat Ankimare Habazak, their vision is like the appearance of lightning. Because there's the idea of Ratzu B'Shov in that Mishnah. Their word within him is Ratzu B'Shov, and we'll see that idea of Ratzu B'Shov appears in number 8.
And also the idea of the end embedded in the beginning is the idea of that even in the very soft massive like in the very beginning is the end is already like in a seed, the trees already there.
Absolutely.
The mouth
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I definitely. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's an amazing soft massive mashvatchila. That's a beautiful idea. The final action is in the first thought, and that's like when you make a plan. The final action of that plan, of carrying out that plan, is in the first thought about it, is in the plan itself. That was the purpose of it. Okay, now the final one, number 8. Eses Sfirot Blima, Belom Picham Ledaber, Velevcha Leharher, V'imratz Picha Ledaber, Velevcha Leharher, Shuv Lemakom, Shelekach Ne'emar, V'chayot Ratzu B'Shov, ועל דבר זה נחלט ברית. 10 Sfirot Blima, bridle, this is how Eric writes it, but bridle or stop your mouth from, withhold your mouth from speaking, and your heart from thinking. And if your mouth, I misspelled mouth there, and if your mouth runs to speak and your heart to think, return to the place. For upon this is written, the chayot, running and returning. So this is from Yechezkel's vision. And regarding this, a covenant was made. So again, since I did Ratzu B'Shov, that's why I think it connects to number 6, because number 6 talks about Ratzu B'Shov. Okay, that was just kind of going over what's there, but let's now hopefully get some kind of achiza, some grasp of what's going on here. I think all these Mishnahs are referring to this idea of Yesh Mi'ayin, and Yesh Mi'ayin is a process that happened before the Sefirot, and from the perspective of the Sefirot and the Ein Sof, the Sefirot are Yesh from Ayin, from the Ein Sof. And then within the Sefirot there's also this idea of Yesh Mi'ayin as well. And there's different descriptions of Yesh Mi'ayin here. So let's go to, I said that number 3, I was going to say something about number 3, and I said let's leave it until the end. So let's go back to that. So number 3, Eses Sefirot V'nima b'mispar Eses Etzbaot Chamesh K'nig Chamesh. 10 Sefirot Blima in the number of the 10 fingers, 5 opposite 5. So you got 10 fingers and 10 toes, and a singular covenant directing or directly in between in the circumcision of the tongue and of the flesh. So this word bemilat halashon, so that is within the covenant of the tongue and of the flesh. You'll see it's an acronym, it's a tziruf, permutation of, if you look at number 8, blimat halashon. Blimat but she doesn't say that. Sorry. You can rearrange. It's not there. You can rearrange. What you can do is you can rearrange the word b'milat to b'limat. The same letters. It's a permutation.
Okay. In general,
right?
Yeah.
So b'milat halashon is the same idea of b'limat halashon, the withholding of the tongue. So we see what's the difference.
Yeah.
Right? So you can, right? So I think it's not coincidence that. So blimat halashon will be the withholding of the tongue. And if you look at, so number 8 doesn't talk about tongue, it talks about mouth. So the question is, what is the difference between the mouth and the tongue? Which we can kind of explore at some point. You see? So going back onto that Mishnah, number 3, we'll see that what it's talking about is this idea of creativity. That the language, the tongue, is that which can, lashon in Hebrew means language. It doesn't just mean a tongue; it means a language. So the Brit of the tongue is a covenant of speaking. You can choose to speak, you can choose not to speak. And the covenant of the flesh, or the circumcision of the flesh, is also an idea of creativity. It is about being. I mean, what activity of man is there which is more godlike, less godlike than creating another human being? Okay. The one thing the Gra says about this Mishnah is that this idea of 5 opposite 5. Within the Kabbalah, 5 opposite 5 corresponds to what is referred to as the Chasadim and the Gevurot. Familiar with them?
Yeah, the 5 within 5 is Chamish Chasidim.
Yeah.
Gevurot.
So if you're looking at it,
Da'at. So I know it's related to that.
it is related to that, correct? Yeah. Very good, very good. So Ari Kaplan, in one of these chapters, I don't know where, he shows how that if you divide the spirit in a particular way, one group of 5 corresponds to Chasadim and one group of 5 corresponds to Gevurot. And what are they? So Chasadim means the kindnesses, the forces of goodness, of kindness in the universe. And Gevurot corresponds to the forces of restriction in the universe, the kind of the source of evil in the universe. Right? And so the separation of 5 and opposite 5 is this idea that we now have a separation within the Sefirot. If there is 5 opposite 5, you've now separated them. The fingers are 5 opposite 5, but they're not together, not on the same hand. Right? What combines those two things together, what decides whether there is a split in the 10 Sefirot, is the circumcision of the tongue and of the flesh. Right? Are we with me? Are we together on this?
So what was when you said Bilimat Halashon? What does that mean? Because Bilimat Halashon, the word but Bilimat Halashon is what, the negation of the tongue?
So no, it's okay. So Bimilat Halashon means the circumcision, the Mila, the circumcision of the tongue, right? And it also means the Mila means the word, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the word of the tongue almost is as well. Again, so we're talking about and Bilimat. So the permutation of Bimilat is Bilimat, and that means it's the same word as we saw before, as Bilom Picha, withhold, restrain your. So in that case, your mouth from speaking. Bilimat Halashon means the restraint of the tongue. Hold your tongue, kind of thing. The idea, like don't say something, hold your tongue. Okay. So you see what I'm saying here? Might be good to put the pens down at some point, I mean, yeah. I don't know.
Okay, fine.
Just to go into it, unless I'm going too fast. And if I'm going too fast.
Okay, fine. Okay, so 5 and 5.
You with us, Raymond?
Yeah.
Still here.
Yeah.
It's a hot one. Let's see. Let's threaten it. I was just reading in the graph where you were saying Chamish neged Chamish.
Yeah. So I think it'll be good for a few minutes just to really just put your pen down, and just to hear this idea, because this is gonna is my go. Might get lost with it. I'd be happy to do that. Because I use the feedback. Otherwise, what I'm saying. Okay, so let me now. Let's see, what have you understood. Where are you at with the with where we are in the Mishnah, in this particular Mishnah? 10, 5 opposite 5. Okay, so I want to hear your thought process of you're at.
So it's 10 Sefirot, which are then divided into the 10 fingers, which is itself 5 on each hand, 5 against 5.
Yeah.
One covenant, which is the unified unique covenant, which has got in the middle. It's got the covenant, the circumcision of the tongue, and the circumcision of the brit, of the physical circumcision of the body, and the circumcision of the tongue is related to the aspect of withholding, withholding your speech.
Well, no, both of them are. Sorry, they're both.
The other,
yeah, I mean, it would. Yeah, you might have more, or also you can refrain from doing that as well.
Refrain from what?
from cohabitation.
Oh, I see. Yeah, physical refrain. Okay.
Yeah.
Restraint. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But there's a split there between the 10 in that, and now there's the first idea of a division where you're splitting 10 as 5 into 5, 5 against 5.
Exactly, yeah. And what happens to that division is, when does the division come about? You understand it? Yeah, cool. So, but in this context, just with this Mishnah, how have you understood this Mishnah? The reason I'm asking you is because I'm kind of don't want to be on the spot, but
I know.
It's a crucial idea. I don't want to get lost in it. There's a tendency within Kabbalah, which is the reason why, again, and this part is a massive part of it. It's important not to. I can't even teach it. So it's important for you to understand it.
Yeah. No.
So that's why I want to kind of see where you're at rather than me just talking with it. Do you understand? Okay, so let me say that. So the tendency within Kabbalah is to just go off and intellectualize and abstractify as well, and kind of go into these kind of, this corresponds to that, and that corresponds to that, and that's where we can kind of really kind of go wrong with it, because if you don't understand one of the concepts or the idea, then your analogies or your correspondences are not going to give you the right understanding of it, and there needs to be, and you need to have a real grasp of it, of the idea here, right? So that's why I said put your pens down so you can hear, so you're not hearing one or two words on it, and just getting a grasp of the idea of it. Then we can come back into it afterwards and ask questions on it, right? Yeah. Okay, so let's. I'm gonna hand it over to you guys and see and read it for me and see what you can figure out from it.
Okay, there's 10 Sefirot, whatever the theme is. That's
But we know what it is. Yeah,
the before stage of. Okay, fine. There's 10 Sefirot, mystical. Mispar essence counted as 10 fingers, Sparot, like there's 10 on the 10 fingers of the hand.
Yeah.
Whatever that means, I don't know why it's using this terminology now. Suddenly relate it to the physical body.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so Chamish Kling Chamish. And then we know that in the physical body, the 10 fingers are divided in each hand as 5 against 5.
Yep.
What that relates to, again, that could really cost like but that's okay, but it's starting to divide it. It sends for which was one unity to a division of 2, and then it links this to the Brit Yachid.
So what is a Brit? What is a Brit?
Covenant.
What is a covenant? What does it mean?
A covenant is like an agreement between you or Hashem on 2 parties.
It's a connection. Really, isn't it? A Brit is a point of connection of 2 opposite things. So it is almost like it's almost like the beginning of separation of mitosis, or is it mitosis of a separation,
Yeah, like you
right?
said.
Yeah. So but it's a point of connection still. If there is a brit, if there is a covenant, I mean, there is still a link there, right?
Yeah.
So, but there is something which can, but it means that there is the covenant can be broken, and therefore there's a complete split there. Understand? Right. So that's what a covenant is. It's a point of connection.
Because the connection between two things, two separate.
Between not necessarily two separate. Well, yeah. In one way, it's two separate things, but it's
unified.
But it's unified. Exactly. It's unifying. It's unifying.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Carry on.
Mechuvan is
Mechuvan, yeah.
Mechuvan
Means well, kivun is a direction, right? Mechuvan means located, or directed, or directing even.
The enter,
yeah.
right? So it's directing the enter
in the middle, in between,
to the milat, the circumcision of the tongue. That's like the tongue is in the middle of the upper body. So our body is divided into two halves. So we've got the head, the intellectual part, which is like the eyes, the ears, the nose, and then we've got the mouth in the middle, and the tongue. And that, in a way, represents related to 5, isn't it? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I think I don't know. I remember there's some relation to that. And then there's and then with the lower part of the body, below the head, you've got the arms, the legs, and the brit milah.
It's another 5.
Which is like another, 2,
well,
4, 5. Yeah, so, there you go. So 5. And here's 1, 2. Yeah, I guess it's 2 ears, 2 eyes, mouth, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so there you've got the unifier. In a way, the unifier there in part of the body is the tongue here, and it's the brit.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the body.
So yeah. So I mean, yeah. Okay. All right. At least I know. Yeah. So
I can't understand it.
Yeah. It is connected to the body. I think.
And the tongue. That speech, there's some, I remember reading, there's some relationship with the brit of the circumcision of the tongue and prophecy. I don't know. Yeah, it could be related to prophecy. It's these two Brit. The two Brits are related to prophecy and connection to Hashem, and so it's to do with the fact that speech is a means to this covenant between you and the Creator, and as is the reproductive.
Yeah, let's turn it around and think about Sefer Yetzira, about what it is. It's about creation.
Yeah.
So and language and how Baruch Shema Bara et Olamo. Right. Blessed is he who spoke and created, and again, Brit Hama'ar is a physical creation, right? And so we just read in Chava said, I've made a person. Oh, remember what she said? Do you remember what it says in this week's parasha, last week's parasha? She says, "I made somebody in the image of God." She said, she mentions that. You see, you remember? Chava mentions, "I've made somebody in the image of God," or something like that.
In the garden,
after with shit. No, with Cain.
Ah, okay. When they had them the chart. Oh, I didn't know. I didn't notice.
Yeah. I'll find it. After they were expelled from the Garden of Eden. And you see, this is all connected. You see, this is all, especially within the Kabbalah, you see, this is all connected. And you mentioned Da'at beforehand, right? And what am I about to read? Tell me what I'm about to read. I'm about to read. Right? You with me? Yeah, we'll say that, yeah. The Ha'adam yada et Chava, Ishto. And the man and Adam knew his wife Chava, v'taher v'taled et Cain, and she was purified, tahar, and she gave birth to Cain, and she said, "Vatomer kaniti ish et Hashem." I have acquired a man Et Hashem, what does that mean? Like, how does it kind of translate it, right? So the translation is, the article here, I have acquired a man with Hashem. So that's how they translate it, right? Hashem, Rashi here, right? Rashi here, it says Kishibara Oti the Etishi, when he's putting words in Chava's mouth, when he created me and my husband, Levado Beranu, he created us by himself. Shutafim anu imo. With Cain, we are now partners with God, right? So so the creative process is a partnership with God. So it's part of God creating. We see this, whenever someone has a baby, we always say that.
That's what we say is the husband and the wife and the Shekhinah.
And the Shekhinah between them, exactly. So we see that reproduction is another. Again, this is why we say Sitra Ariyot, the mysteries of the physical unions. So it is part of the creative process. So this Sefer is about creation. So how does creation manifest, right? If God, and we saw it, but Baruch, we say every day, Baruch Shama, blessed is he who spoke and created his universe. And so here we see the first idea of speaking. Eses brought blima. Blima we said was silence. Eses brought of blima, of not speaking. It's in the 10 fingers and the 10 toes. 5 opposite 5. Right? 5 opposite 5. And what is in the middle is the Brit is speaking. Right?
The aspect of creation,
which is of Lashon, the aspect of exactly. And so and it's connected with the Ada. God, Adam knew Chava because, like he said before, the 5 opposite 5 is referred to the Chasidim and the Gevorot, the kindnesses and the rigors and the kindnesses, which is the same idea of the Etz Hadat Tovera, good and evil, the knowledge of morality, the knowledge of good and evil. Right? This is the beginnings of duality, of differentiation, and differentiation, duality is inherently between good and evil in some kind of way. When there is no good and evil, when there is only one being. Good means, for we can when there are two of us, we can get into an argument and have a fight, and I can steal from you or you can steal from me, and it's good for me and bad for you. Right? There is this concept of morality between them. If there is only me, then where is morality? Where is good and evil? If there is only one being, where is good and evil? So good and evil is the sense of morality coming into, or the sense of good and the manifestation of good and evil, and the idea of knowledge, of da'at, is this idea, right? Da'at, within the sphere of da'at, there is this manifestation of good and evil, and connection also. So da'at is we just read, is the idea of connection, right? So da'at is this brit hama, is brit yachid mechuban be'emsa, the single covenant in between, which is da'at, which is not a sphira, which is 11, 10, 11. We'll see this in the next one. 10 or 11, it's not essentially a sphira, but it is, because it has some kind of form and substance. It appears as something independent, individual, right? When their thing splits up, and the 5 opposite 5 split, there is this thing which appears in between. Which look, what is this thing? This is a new thing here. It is the connection between between the left and the right, and the division between the left and the right. It's a that type of rack, and you can bind them together to create a unity, or you can separate them and create division and divisiveness. Again, this idea of Brit Yachid, there is a singular covenant. Wait a minute, you just told me there are 2. There is Brit Hamaor and Brit Halashon. There is the circumcision of the tongue and the circumcision of the mouth. But what do you mean a singular covenant? There are 2 things here. No, it's one thing. It's one thing manifested in different ways. And we'll see this idea of Yachid manifest again. We saw this beforehand, different places. Adon Yachid, we saw in number 5. Adon Yachid, he is singular. And with number 7, we saw Adon Yachid again. This idea of unity. That's why I said that this idea is this idea of unity. Every Tzadok talks about both with Brit about Maaseh Bereshit and Maaseh Merkavah, there is this idea of unity. Maaseh Bereshit is the unity which retains within it some aspect of differences, some aspect of division. Maaseh Merkavah is there is no division, and that's what we see. That's what this number 3 is beginning this idea of Maaseh Merkavah, Maaseh Bereshit. Okay, it's separate because
starting the separation.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Again, and he said, why is it talking about the body? Well, think about it. This idea of the physicality, the imagery of the physical body is again the idea is it's already a defined form. It is separate. It is physical. It is gufni, gashmi, right?
Yeah.
So there is an element of self there within that space, right? Now, something really interesting that the Midrash brings is that before, you know this, I think I mentioned it beforehand. Before God created from the tree of good, before God created the universe, the Midrash says he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
The creation?
Hashem, have you not written that? Amazing, it's in the Midrash. Amazing. I'll send it to you. Before Hashem created the universe, he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does that mean, right? But it does explain what the Nachash said to Chava when he said, "Don't eat from it, because or you will become like God. God knows you will become like Him. How will you become like Him? Because He did the same thing. God ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you eat from it, you'll be like God. And what can you do? You can create. You can create. It's only after they sent out from the garden, we know that Adam, that he knew Eve and began the process of creation.
Interesting. It's only after you ate from dark that you could die.
I mean, I'm not saying, yeah, exactly. After, exactly, isn't it? Exactly. Again, I'm just finding these things and bringing them in a way in a container thing. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that they were infertile before they ate from the tree. Like, you could argue that maybe they were infertile before they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In order for them to be fertile, they had to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What does that mean?
Well, the Arigan thing that Sharkavanot links it to.
So he says.
He links it to, he says, what was the sin of they ate from the tree of evil? He said, that Lashon Zivug.
Yes.
It's the idea that they had some sort of sexual union.
Yeah, and that's what the Bahir says, right? And we saw it somewhere else. Sefer Bahir says that with the snake, yeah.
Okay, yeah, right, yeah.
Okay. This is a very deep topic. We've had a month without it. And I have a sense that it's going to be overwhelming a little bit, but I wanted to, so maybe we should stop in a minute. But I want to just kind of bring a culmination to today so that you're not confused when you leave. So I want to just finish off this idea of this particular Mishnah, how it's connected. How I'm reading this Mishnah is the creative process begins with a initial division, which is connected to this idea of eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil means you now know that there is good and there is evil. And when that happens, you've now given yourself the power of speech, because speech is an act of division. There is no speech without definition. There is a parameter. There is a word. Is a quantum. It gives quantity. It gives form to something, right? To whatever it might be. I name something. I've given it a definition. A computer, laptop, whatever it might be. Up until then, my language, my ability to form language, is my ability to conceptualize an entity, an object as distinct and other and separate from myself and from the other things which I haven't named computer. When I say computer, now there is computer and there is something which is not computer. There is book and there is something which is not book. There is this, there is Yosef Chaim and there's somebody who is not Yosef Chaim, right? So naming is this creative process. It establishes individuals which are different from one another. And cohabitation is the same idea. The seed of that being exists in two separate, in potential, and then comes down and becomes a separate entity. Again, so this idea of there is proliferation here. This when one word gives birth to another word, one idea gives birth to another idea. You see how number one gives rise to number two, because you add two together, you have two, and then you have multiplication, proliferation from that idea. When you don't speak, when you are silent, when you refrain from knowing in that sense of it, what you've done is you created a unity again, right? And so therefore that is visually, conceptually considered the sphera below Chokhmah and Bina, which is Chokhmah and Bina, the beginning of division, mother and father in Ari and Kabbalah. Not speaking is Da'at Elyon, which is Keter, which is above both of them. So again, but I've defined them within the sphera. I've used the sphera to define what the sphera are in general, right? So again, that's why it's really complicated, this idea. That's why the grass, he says that these 32 paths are within the Chokhmah, within wisdom of Keter. It is within the wisdom of Arich and Pin of Keter.
Yeah.
Right? So, i.e. they exist within that. Okay? So
withholding is
so what I'm saying is that withholding actually becomes Keter, but it's also the idea of unity, the idea of absolute of Bitul B'Metziut, Yichuda Ilah. There is this greater unity of non-division at all. Right? And there is a lower unity, a Yichuda Tata, which is a unity of two separate things. There is Dvekut, which is two things coming together and becoming one, but they still not fully one there. But there is before that where they are not even separate at all. They are completely one thing. Like twins, I suppose. Before they were, at the beginning they were one, yeah. And then they became two. Okay, so this is the creative process, and the idea of that is this is meditation. So this is supposed to be practical. Let's give you an idea of understanding how the mind works through meditation, how the mind works through the process of what meditation leads into, which is a prophetic experience, which is again the idea of tzviyatan, their vision and how their vision manifests. Okay, so summarize that one. The separation of 5 opposite 5 is the separation of good and evil. It is the creation of language, it is the beginning of that creative process before creation can take place. And reproduction is part of that, knowledge, data is part of that. When we go into our silence of not speaking, then we have Adon Yachid, we have the Brit Yachid, we have the Ein Sof, we have things coming, we have the unity of everything together. Okay? Okay. If you've understood that, have you understood that? Okay.
Beyond understanding, it's practical.
It is. Well, okay, fine. Yeah, there's that practical thing. Yeah. So, but let me end there, and I want to open up to questions, and I really want you to just ask even if you think it's a stupid question, ask it, so that I don't want you to. I want you to. I'm seeding your mind with these ideas, but I don't want you to leave confused. I want to have some kind of understanding of it. And then we're going to go back to it. Relevant questions?
Funny enough, I was just about to look up the verse right at the end. Not a question, a point, but it's on your point. It says, I think it's penultimate verse maybe, that Abraham Let me get it. Hang on.
Talking about the last verse of the Sefer Yetzira.
Yeah, or penultimate verse. You read it out, the one where it says Abraham used the letters and blah blah blah.
Is it going to add clarity or is it going to add confusion or relevance?
No, it adds clarity. It's on your your point.
Last one was chapter 1.
Oh, yeah, because it does talk about covenant. You're right. Okay, so the last Mishnah of the 6th chapter. That's what Rowan was referring to.
Mm.
Okay, this book has been ascribed to Avraham Avinu, and therefore the last Mishnah comes and talks about it and says how Abraham grasped the creative power of God and understood it. It says, I'm going to read the whole thing. When Abraham came, I'm going to translate it, and he saw, and he gazed, and he saw, and he understood, and he investigated, and he engraved, and he carved, and he was successful in creation. He was successful in the creative process, as it says, and the souls which they created it doesn't say in Haran, it actually doesn't say in Haran. Oh yeah, in Haran, sorry. Yeah, they made it in Haran. And do you recall Abulafia said about this? Abulafia mentions this.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay.
Yeah, I remember right at the beginning.
Yeah, right at the beginning. Right? Immediately, the master of everything was revealed himself upon him. Right? So again, we see this idea of Adon as well, the master.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry. So it's just about the point of creative power arising with letters, language. So it just goes to your point, but it doubles up on it.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay, what were you saying, Roland?
I'm saying because it's perhaps actually after the first chapter.
Yeah.
It's actually probably the most important verse that makes explicit the point of the creative power being language itself.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, that's it.
It actually does talk about the same thing. You're right. It's a mirror of it. I'm not going to bother with it. We'll look at it next time. It talks about the covenant there as well, and the fingers and the toes. Okay, questions. And here are many more questions. No?
Brought up a lot of stuff. I don't think we
Okay.
so it would be too specific, these things about
Okay.
dance and whatever. It's
Okay,
fine. It's fine. It's a nice overview of the idea of the relating the unity to of the covenant to the Brit to creation, the creative process.
Yeah.
This creation in this term in Hebrew, noled, koach and yelidat.
Yeah, so you're trying
In Hebrew, what's it
Creative.
What's it called? Reproduction, creation, asiyah,
to
Yetzira.
Yetzira. I mean, like the Abriya Yetzira. Asiyah.
No, of what is it? So Lasha, the Brit and pre-production. It's leading to the propagation of humanity, which is what said in Yelidat.
Don't know. I don't know how to say it.
I'm writing everything in Hebrew. Whatever. It's fine. Okay. So, yeah,
We'll look it up. We'll look it up.
Unification leads to creation.
Okay. Lisa, you have any?
Got thousands of questions, all of them rhythmic ones.
Okay. I hope this hasn't been. I hope we haven't delved too deep. With a series.
I'm born confused.
Okay. Okay, so that's the end of it then. We'll finish up. I'm going to stop the recording, stop sharing, and I will stop.